well, what next after the merge? Like, what's the next like bullish thing? Where's the next catalyst? It's the most bullish event in crypto's history. It is the catalyst. Once the merge happens, all you have to do is wait. The merge is the thing that like once it happens, all you do is wait. And like eventually time is on your side.
The 11 unidentified flying objects were a highlight. What percentage did you give that of it being like something beyond just Starlink or, you know,
right? Like to what degree did I actually think that was aliens?
Yeah.
Like there was a moment, there was a time where I was like, I don't have a rational explanation for this.
That thing was so weird looking. I think if you didn't have that inkling in the back of your mind, you're dead. Because like I
was having side combos with Eric. Eric was being so funny because I did also think that Eric was going to be the most tinfoil about it, but he was actually the most grounded about it, and he kept going back and forth at the same time where he was like, I think we might be having a moment. And then the next moment be like, this is absolutely nothing. Couldn't be anything. I could care less what this is. And then you're like, dude, I actually think this might be aliens.
Well, it could have been the mushrooms talking.
Could have been.
I remember like trying to be like a little bit stoic about it, where it's like, okay, like there's nothing in my brain that explains this except for aliens. And if this is aliens, then like, you know what? I'm gonna finish this camp trip. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna hang out with my boys for this last normal weekend ever, and we go back to society, and those are actually aliens. Then, like, I'll deal with it then.
Yeah, we have to find water first.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do the aliens have water? Because that would be nice.
That was actually pretty hard. Like, not having water.
So
for
you
a
told
little while.
You told the story on your Bankless roll up, but we haven't like told our story to our listeners. Like we did a 20-mile hike over a 2-day period, and on the second day we ran out of water. It was like
we didn't run out of water. We realized that the trajectory we had undershot the trajectory.
Well, hold on. We ran out of water. First of all, the water filter that you brought was missing a key component, the filter.
Okay, yeah, the filter. Yeah.
So I thankfully had like these little water filtration or water purification tablets in the bag,
right,
which saved us in that moment for for the trip.
That saved the trip.
Yeah, I wonder what we'd just turn around.
We'd turn around.
Yeah.
Back to the cabin.
Yeah.
That would have been okay.
I mean, wouldn't have been so bad. But.
It's a hell of a cabin.
Cabin's amazing.
I have to say, we said this during the trip as well, but I kept reflecting on it. Washington State is so fucking underrated. Like, the more I think about it, I'm just like...
on the pod.
Yeah.
Don't say
Your
it.
hometown is deep value buy territory.
It really is.
Yeah.
I could do a little time each year up there.
Absolutely.
Well, all right, brother. Let's kick this off more officially. You had us on Bankless. It was absolutely amazing. We had a grand old time. And now you're here. Our first ever guest. We thought there's absolutely no one else we'd want to do this with. We're coming up on the merge. It's an exciting time. We just finished this trip. There's so much we're going to get into. But first of all, just thanks, man. It's been like an absolute pleasure just becoming homies, all of us together, growing together, going on trips together now. I'm just really grateful for it. I know we all are. So yeah, just thanks for doing this.
Oh, of course, and I'm super jealous of your guys' community. Honestly, like Bankless community, the Bankless community is amazing, and I love it deeply. And they've created this amazing DAO thing. But there's this like part of Bankless where like we just make our deal is like we make content, and so like we fill a vacuum with content. And it's actually kind of robbed us of this like back and forth with our community, which is something I've been meaning to work on for this like next quarter for the remainder of this year. And it's largely inspired by like what I see out of your guys' community, which is you guys have so much like just back and forth with your community. It makes me a little jealous, but I'm also I'm part of that community, so I get to experience it for myself.
It honestly feels like a little bit of a joint community because like we obviously came up listening to Bankless. Our listeners in our community listen to Bankless, so it's very easy to talk about the same topics, the same narratives, whether we agree or disagree. It's just cool that like it's a somewhat of a shared community, shared audience. I love it.
Yeah, it feels like you're like our next door neighbor, and you kind of like you walk around the fence once in a while, and you sit down and chat.
Tool time guy who like looks over the fence. Wilson.
Yeah. He is Wilson. I love that. Yeah, no, our community is amazing. I appreciate you saying that. And but yeah, the reality is like a lot of these people came from Bankless, and I think they were like, wow, we can really cultivate an audience and a group and a community of people that is authentic. I think that that's what people really feel and experience when they're in there. They don't have a space to talk about things beyond crypto in Discord in particular. So we really do cultivate that. All right, where are we taking this from here, boys?
Well, we know that the Layer 0 version of David Hoffman's interview is reserved for Ryan, but according to our Discord, they want to hear a little bit more about you. They apparently shun your crypto takes because they already know them, but we're going to get into that. But I think it would be interesting, some things that we know about you that would be cool for people to know. Oh, we do have an Alfalfa round.
First?
We do that first.
All right.
Is anyone drinking anything?
Let's do it first.
That's another thing.
That's another thing to fix. Yeah. Cheers.
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 Salud.
Cheers.
Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Hoffman's got a little
what you
whiskey,
got there?
Bourbon.
Yeah, I got some Kentucky bourbon, which was actually sent to me by Josh Rosenthal, the man behind the Crypto
Renaissance man
podcast himself. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Okay, let's do the Alfalfa round.
All right, we're going to make this snappy.
Yes.
I did not have any trades, but I'm still holding the puts. Finally, the puts on the S&P 500 turned green, which means that the whole long portfolio is still down. But I can't wait to call my JP Morgan manager and be like, "Don't worry, this whole time I've been fading your portfolio in a separate account." So anyway, nothing changed, but still holding the puts.
I've been selling ETH Vol. Same story. It's still paying off, and I'm what I like now is on our trip in the cabin. I remember specifically Steven walking me through the charts one morning, and we were trying to identify the price at which to go long ETH, and it looks to me like it's somewhere in that realm of like 1250 to 1350. And I remember specifically asking David, I was like, hey, so, Steven's walking me through this chart, and I think I want to start to accumulate ETH at this price level. How do you accumulate? Do you remember your response?
Yeah, I was like, I buy it.
Exactly.
And I put it in my ledger.
Buy.
So for me, I'm still like selling puts below that level, at that level, trying to like accumulate in this like little enhanced way. But, at the end of the day, I think this is probably a good point in time to accumulate anyway. So that's where I'm at.
It's good. I remember on last week's pod, I think I said that the Fed was going to nuke us, and the price always crashes when I go on vacation. So I said I was going to hedge before my vacation, which I did not do, and I lost a lot of money. So that was fun. But I got some buy orders set. As you said, I'm going to start buying at $13.50 if we go there. I think we probably will, but if not, I'm not going to be mad by any stretch. I've also started accumulating more penguins. So
Pengus.
Yes, I've been buying pengus. A lot of little pudgies actually. I started buying right at the top as I always do with NFTs, and I've just been grabbing a few on the way down, and I want to get a little squad going.
This is new because normally you just talk about it and then they moon and you don't buy. So this time you bought. That's cool.
Yep, this time I did. I'm like, I'm going to buy, and it just immediately lost half. So
well these are like the mutant version. These are the little baby version, right?
Yeah, and I really
when
like
did those launch.
I really like pudgies. They launched like almost a year ago.
Oh,
you're so fucked on these, by the way. You're so fucked.
Dude. They're adorable though.
They're so cute.
One of them looks exactly like Anthony Sassano. One version totally.
I know which one you're talking about.
That one's good.
He's in it for the art. All right. Anything else to me? Some skincare alfalfa came up on the trip actually. Dude. So, and then it came up again in our Discord. Liquidiate was talking about his Japanese healthcare routine. And last night at like 11:30, I just got inspired. I was like, all right, I need to step up. And we talked about this, and you guys assumed that I have this whole routine, but it literally revolves around wash your face and put on a face lotion with SPF. So I was like, all right, first step. I think David might use the same lotion, the CeraVe, something like that. CeraVe SPF 30 daily moisturizer. And I saw that Cetaphil makes one. I was like, all right, I'm going to try that. It already had arrived like before this morning, that fast. Fucking Amazon, like 4 hours later. And I tried it, a little too thick, but I discovered what toner is for the first time. Do you guys know what toner is?
I've seen it.
You've seen it?
Does it make you more tan?
No.
Does it balance the pH levels of the skin?
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, this is all Mina approved, by the way.
Yeah.
All these brands, these are good.
Fucking rabbit holed this last night. So like toner originally I think started back during the acne days with Proactive and things like that. It was like stage 2, I remember that. And it would burn your skin and you had cleaned it out. But toner these days is a much more like very clean, very smooth, just to clear the skin and purify it. Get it ready for the moisturizing layer that's about to come. So all
is
new
this
to
the
me.
Alfalfa Round?
Yes, this is the
I
Alfalfa
guess that's
Round.
the life Alfalfa Round.
Yeah.
Skincare.
Armand's new thing is he just doesn't talk about money.
All right, you're up.
All right, David.
Oh God. Okay. So it's actually interesting that this is happening this week because I bought a token this week that I don't usually buy tokens, especially not in bear markets. You know, tokens are off during bear markets.
Wow, what a blessing. We get to experience this right now.
Yeah. So, well, hang on. I'll come back to the token. So, because that'll be the cherry on top. I'm always on a position with like ETH BTC, and I'm like absolutely kicking myself that I didn't put like using either some form of compound or Aave to take leverage on the 0.073 ETH BTC that it hit 3 days ago, and now of course it's back up to 0.0777. And like, man, does that chart look fucking good. So I'll probably slowly like DCA into a stronger ETH BTC position, and what that means is borrowing WBTC from compound and selling it for ETH, and then putting it ETH back into compound.
Nice. Well, I saw your technical analysis, by the way, on Twitter.
Yeah, you saw that. Yeah,
solid arrow up.
for a firm believer in that one. You can see it in the chart. And what was the other thing I was going to say? I can't remember. Okay, so like this token that I DCA'd into, I put not like a big part of the portfolio, but it's the token that I own the largest percentage supply of because of how goddamn illiquid this thing is. So the market cap is right now $1.5 million.
Oh my! This is gonna move markets.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
We are not allowed to front run this, so this is an SEC violation.
Yeah.
The fact that I didn't know like a token could be that illiquid, but like I can literally see my buys on the chart, and they're just like not that big of buys. So this token is called a DBL.
Yep.
Doubloons.
Oh, I'm a hodler. I'm a hodler.
Yeah,
for
I own some
for
too.
Galleon DAO.
This was like 6 months ago, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I bought it once again, or way back when, and then sold it just as things got hella bearish. But like it's built on top of token sets, which I don't think a lot of newer Ethereum people will be familiar with. But once upon a time, it was like the darling of DeFi. I don't really know what happened to token sets, and I say that as an angel advisor. I say that as a seed investor into it. I don't really know what happened with that whole thing. The teams like haven't seen an investor update. Let me tell you. But this Galleon DAO is building on top of it, and they're building. And from like the Gossip Sphere Index Co-op, which is a Galleon DAO competitor, has lost a lot of favor. So that's my bet, and I finished DCAing this week, so that's my position.
Hell yeah.
I love it. That's pure alfalfa. Another thing I want to say that I forgot, we have you on the pod. I'm buying Bank token. I love Bankless token.
What are your catalysts that you think for ahead for the Bankless token? Please inform me.
I believe in the management team.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure there's no management team. I don't know if you've noticed, but like me and Ryan are not active in the DAO very often.
I'm selling everything.
Can devs please do something?
Devs, please do something.
All right, back to you, Nick.
Yeah, that was good. So, like I said, the Discord is curious. They have curiosities, and one thing we've learned about you that I think is pretty funny is the whole host of jobs that you've had before crypto.
Yeah,
you've had a handful of like odd jobs and careers that have kind of preceded crypto and Bankless. So do you mind taking us through some of those jobs that you have? Because I think that's something fun that we know about you, but maybe most people don't.
Yeah, assuming post-college, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. First job out of school was at a mental health agency. So it was a private company that a lot of its revenue was basically from state contracts. So it was basically an extension of the state. And it was in this like child long-term inpatient program. So these particular kids would have to fit inside of one of three like qualifiers. Like one, you're unsafe to yourself, as in like you're cutting, you're suicidal, like eating disorders would fit in under this camp. Another one is you're unsafe to others. So it's like kind of basic conduct disorder, but usually there's another sort of like psychological disorder that goes alongside it. And then the third is like you just can't meaningfully take care of yourself. And what that would mean is like you're like decently schizophrenic to the point that you'll put yourself into a dangerous position without realizing it. So like these three categories of kids, it was between 13 and 18 years old. As soon as you hit 18, you're an adult, so you can't be in this facility anymore. So they discharge you somewhere else. And so like these kids would be with us anywhere from like 4 months on the shortest end to like 2+ years on the longest end. And so like because it's social services, so it's understaffed, right? So you're working a ton of hours. And if you're working a ton of hours where these children literally live, like you kind of become part of their daily life. Like you are just a part of their life. And so like it gets kind of like intimate with these kids because like you're there for 60 hours of their week of their life, and they're super bored because every single door is locked and they have to ask permission to go through every single door. And so like you just become like, we're counselors. So it's like, imagine when you were daycare and like the daycare counselors, except instead of a daycare, this is a psychological ward. So that was my first job. I did that for 2 years, and like
nice and like light first job.
yeah, so like that. Well, so I graduated with a degree in psychology, right? And the idea was I would go and get a clinical psychologist PhD. So this made sense on that like career stepping stone. But that was like quick burnout on that job. The fact that I lasted more than like 9 months is like longer than 90% of anyone who worked that job at that place.
Well, there's a lot of new crypto natives that are thankful you chose a new career choice. That's for sure.
Yeah. So the career after that was, all right, so I did that for 2 years, and I was like, I just need to do something else. And like my interest had expanded beyond like the brain and started to go into the body a little bit. And so that's when I got in a job into just personal training as kind of a stepping stone into that whole world. Was a personal trainer for about like 6 months or so, but then they fired me. Yeah, fired me because I wasn't making enough revenue from supplement sales from sales. Yeah. And so like I got like super jaded by that whole industry because what is a personal trainer is actually just like a salesman who knows, basic gym's bro science 101 more than your client. And so your client is like, oh, you're smarter than me. I'll do whatever you say. And then you tell them to buy supplements. So I didn't like that job. So that's when I got a job as a physical therapy assistant. So I worked at a physical therapist clinic for about a year or so, while also shadowing at another one. And that was like my last big job before finding crypto. And so, oh God, are we going through the crypto jobs too?
Yeah, we want to hear it.
All right. I'm going to go faster this time.
Yeah.
First job was New Alchemy. It was an ICO advisory agency. And so peddling shitcoins before I realized that ICOs were scams. And I was still like optimistic for ICOs because I came in as like 2017 was my first rodeo, right? So like, oh, ICOs, we've solved human coordination. This is great. And then I realized like, no, because I'm also learning how fucking markets work, right? So I didn't know anything. I didn't know shit about personal finance. Never took a business course. My first like significant position in the stock market was a 2x AMD leverage position.
Okay.
Which is actually a good pretty good position trade to hold. But I sold it for Ether before it went from $6 to $32.
Well, also a good trade.
Yes, yeah. And then Ether went down to 80 and AMD went to 32. Anyways, but so like I'm like a classic Robinhood user, like learning to like save money and manage money for the first time. And then, so ICO advisory company blows up. So I joined there February 2018. It blows up in October of 2018. Go figure. We didn't make a dime of revenue in like Q3. And so then I go from ICO advisory to this thing called Bunker Capital, which was a security token advisory agency, which follows the meta of that whole era. ICOs folded into security tokens. And the reason why the ICO mania stopped, because everyone realized they were issuing illegal securities. So then I became a...
Bitcoiners might say that your ICO and security token experience is your proper training for ETH, for being an ETH maxi.
Yeah, they would say that, certainly. Security token company blows up about less than a year after joining it because, again, don't make a dime in revenue. But that actually folds into tokenized real estate. One of the clients of that company that actually did come out of that thing and they brought me on board as like my history throughout the bear market is going from like, you know, when Jack Sparrow's like stepping off of his sinking boat at the end of the very start of the first movie. It's like that for me, from like blowing up on New Alchemy into Bunker Capital blows up and I get off of that one into Realty, tokenized real estate. And I was the COO of Realty for like a year and a half. And that company still exists miraculously. That one's still up and running. And so that's pretty cool. And then I was starting the Bankless podcast as like a side hobby while I was doing Realty. And then so that the Bankless podcast started in February 2020, and then Bankless LLC started in September 2020.
And if I remember correctly, you were the catalyst to push Ryan into starting Bankless. Is that right?
Yeah. So the way that Bankless worked is that Ryan and I were just two people on Twitter, and the first like significant interaction I had was my Medium account. So I had this Medium that I was putting all of my original content into, just all my early writing. The first time I went to ETH Denver, I didn't have this Medium account, and so I just went back to my college days when I was writing, and I was writing in like Microsoft Word, and I printed out like I think 30 copies of each essay that I had written. So I had like 3 essays, and I printed out 30 copies of each, stapled them all together, and had like 20 pounds of paper in my backpack that I was carrying around ETH Denver, handing out as like, hey, will you please like read my writing because I think it's interesting. Yeah.
It's just like the Jerry Maguire.
Because I didn't know the internet goddamn existed.
This is Jerry Maguire's manifesto. It's amazing.
And I'm like obviously thinking like, this is weird. Like, what should I be doing instead? And I get back and I'm like, oh, Medium. Like, duh, I can just like send them a link. And so I start writing on my Medium and I'm growing a following that way. People knew me as like the guy that like was handing out articles at ETH Denver 2018 for a while. And so like, so I was growing my following that way. And then my Medium gets rugged by Medium. Like banned, like taken down or something. It was like a classic, like probably the same thing that happened with the Bankless YouTube recently. It was just like some errant algorithm that accidentally targeted my Medium, probably because I was posting too many links outbound or something. But like I went to Twitter, of course, just for, you know, the engagement. And I say like, oh, this is why we need like decentralization. Like I'm getting censored, blah, 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 blah. Got me a ton of traction. And then Ryan retweeted it saying like, oh, I found David's like resources really, really helpful. What the hell, Medium? And I was like, oh, wow. Like the Ryan Shaw Adams, the pomp of Ethereum reads my articles. And so like I started like engaging with him that way. And meanwhile, I had started my own podcast, POV Crypto. And then at one point in time in late 2019, Ryan started the Bankless newsletter. And so at this point, Ryan and I had figured out that like we basically say the same things about Ethereum and like we have the same ideas about Ethereum. Like one day we just like hop into Zoom and like talk for the first time for like an hour, just shared ideas. Just like, here's what we think. It's like, oh yeah, no, I think this. And I also think this. And that was like our first like actual face-to-face. And then at some point I was like, okay, I just place articles on my Medium because I need a place to host it. But like Ryan's doing this cool Bankless thing, and it's a mission that I believe in and I'm totally aligned with. And there's literally no difference for me personally if I post my articles on his newsletter, because it's largely the same audience, and I can borrow from his audience and I can get my audience over to his newsletter and just be like good for his newsletter. And so started doing that. We created a relationship where we had some deal where I would write for his newsletter. And then during that time, I'm like also pestering him every once in a while, like after we're done coordinating on like what goes in the newsletter, which of my articles is going in the newsletter when, I'm like pestering him and about like, Ryan, I don't know why you're also not doing the Bankless podcast. Like, why aren't you doing the Bankless podcast? And he's like, I don't know. That sounds like a bunch of work. I don't really want to do it. I don't really get it. I don't really want to do that. Bad idea. And like this continued for like 3-4 months or something. And then finally I was like, this is fucking ridiculous. Like we will start the Bankless news podcast. You just show up. I'll do all the editing and we'll get this thing like out the door. And like, that's what compelled him. And then we did our first episode in February of 2020, our first episode in 2020, second episode like 2 weeks later. And our second episode was the like 80% drawdown on Ether that bottomed at $80 because of COVID. And that was a very distracting second episode to ever record.
With that live chart just plummeting, big red candles. Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
Yeah, and we're talking about the history of monetary policy. Yeah.
Does Ryan tell this story the same? Would he tell it the same way, you think?
I don't know.
We might not get his coming.
He did say this once, and I don't know how much he really meant this or was really just kind of saying it for effect, but he did say like there were times on the Bankless newsletter that like, because it was sucking up, he put in so much sweat into that thing because he used to write that thing 5 days a week.
Wow.
Like every single edition, Ryan, like just imagine Ryan on a laptop, like banging out like a newsletter, how to do this, how to do that. And so the amount of just like energy that man put into that newsletter to like bootstrap that thing was actually insane. And he said this once, and like I said, I don't know how much he meant this, but or if it was just more of a joke, but he's like, yeah, like I thought about like folding up shop because it was like so much fucking labor going into this thing. But then like before we started the podcast together, he had also hired this other guy, Lucas, to start like taking a lot of the load off. And I think that's when he started to get into the idea of just like, oh, I don't have to write this thing. I have to find other people to write it. Like, you know, kind of leaning into like the business side of things. And so like, I think like that, and then also we started the podcast and the synergies behind the newsletter and the podcast made both just explode. Like it's really hard to start a podcast and have 1,000 downloads on your first episode ever. And we had like 3,500 on our first episode ever. And so like the nice. Bounce back. And so like, that's really how this flywheel started going. And so like had the newsletter feed off the podcast feed off the newsletter. And then 6 months later we made the company. Yeah.
And scale you have, my friend. It's been amazing to watch and amazing to like, watch it next to you, at least in the recent months and year. So let's talk about scaling some investments. Stephen has some questions about, just general your investment kind of outlook.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, did you fancy yourself an investor at all before crypto? Was like growing money like something you ever thought about?
Yeah, I was loosely getting into it with Robinhood and just like basic normie investing and like starting to basically get a semblance of a grasp on this whole world. But it was like to a point where the traditional equities and macro markets are such a dug out science that like, how could I didn't take a single class in college. What am I going to start? Like, how am I supposed to understand this thing? There are so many people who are way better than this. I always just felt kind of futile. Like my one edge of alpha was like, I kind of understand like computer science to a little bit, that AMD makes sense as an investment, but I couldn't, it was always a gut feel, not like here's a decent analysis. So then I get into crypto and like, it's this blank slate of like much more in my mind, like pure economics and pure finance, because crypto is just a little bit closer to the metal than I think any other form of finance. And it also is this blank slate. And so I didn't feel behind. So when I was learning about crypto, I was like, oh, the difference between the starting point and the frontier of crypto is like one cycle of time. Whereas for me, the difference between where I started and the frontier of like traditional investing was going to be my whole fucking lifetime. And I didn't have the time or an energy or patience or interest, frankly, to be good at normie investing. But then I discovered crypto and it's like, not only is this like, I'm not that far from the surface, but also it's just fundamentally interesting at the same time. And so those two things really kept me going. But to answer your question, no, like I had no concept of money before crypto.
So I want to follow up on that. So you seem like a guy who has a pretty clear why today. And your why seems to be like to amplify the message that crypto espouses, which is like, enabling the participation in financial markets for the world, decentralization, et cetera. With that, you're also playing a money game, right? Like you're buying ETH at a price and you're hoping that price goes higher. Is there a number in your mind at which you would say like, that's enough, and now I don't need to buy ETH anymore or care about the price of ETH anymore because I am personally David Hoffman set up where I'm like, I've reached my goals there?
Yeah, I hit that number last bull market. The number, I've now gone down below that number.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
But I think overall that number is relatively low. And also like, I actually did get kind of like worked coming on the downside of this whole bull market, but my income from Bankless is sufficiently strong. And even if my like number, even if my number was above my like retirement number, I don't even know what my retirement number is. I just know what a gut feel of it is. If I'm above that number, or if I'm actually at zero, it doesn't matter, because like my income from Bankless is sufficiently strong that I can support my life, and that is my life. And so like by definition, it all works. So actually this personal savings I have is kind of irrelevant to me, because I get to do Bankless stuff, and Bankless stuff pays me money to do more Bankless stuff, which is all I need.
So what about like this idea too, like, so holding coins like ETH or ERC20s like doubloon, they're highly volatile. Like, is there a situation where you might branch out of just holding crypto stuff and maybe like diversify into safe, like, you know, I'm a traditional financial advisor. Would you ever want to, you know, hold like treasuries or so? Do you invest in anything other than crypto, and would you consider doing that?
Any financial instrument outside of crypto, I think, is like outside of my scope. The only other thing I'll actually invest in is like physical real estate that are my houses. I have one house. I could see myself buying a second house. I could see myself buying, like, if as soon as I have like enough crypto, I could see myself like, okay, that's enough crypto, I'll buy a house or remodel another house. But I don't think there's like a world where I buy bonds or the S&P or a particular equity, really. Yeah.
So, I mean, before we jump into other questions, like, how do you handle this volatility then? Because I think out of maybe Armand and I are similar, and I know you hold some stuff outside of crypto, but you know, having all your money in one asset class that's so volatile, like how do you handle that? How do you manage that? Because, you know, even I look at the portion of my portfolio that I have in crypto, and it goes up and down. I'm pretty at peace with it because it's a portion of my portfolio. How do you feel about that being, you know, the significant majority of, let's say, assume your net worth, you know?
Let me tell you, it's really fun to watch your net worth jump by $1 million inside of 7 days. Like that's like
that part is fun.
It's a pretty thrilling experience.
It's the price of admission, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like my personal number of like how much money I want to have accessible to me it's like low. I don't know what I would do with like a lot of money. I don't know what I would really like. So like having like tripling my net worth once it's already above the money, above the line, doesn't matter. And so like, so long as it's volatile and not so close to zero, then we're Gucci here. Well, and also again, like the significant amount of cash flow from Bankless is a huge buffer on that.
Right.
So if I didn't have that, then I would probably like shore up a lot of volatility, but that's not in my plan. So.
Yeah. You said something interesting though. You actually said it could go down to zero and you'd be okay because you have Bankless and you have the income that you produce from Bankless. And one of the things I heard, tell me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like you actually live this philosophy of playing for a living. Would you say that's correct? That what you get to do is like you are earning an income and you are fulfilled by your work so much that you're essentially playing for a living and making money while doing it? You've actually said this a few times in different ways. I'm curious if you think about it that way.
Yeah. And this is something that like the culture that we've built out at Bankless pretty explicitly is that like we need to get Bankless to a point where like everything feels extremely downhill. And as in like we're walking downhill, like we're just going to our natural place. And when we hire at Bankless, like we hired this like social media guy who like we just said, hey, can you just like do our tweets and like our basic stuff, right? Like, so can you just manage that? And then so we brought him on and he started doing it, but then he started doing some other stuff that was out of scope. And we were like, oh, great, like do that stuff. But then he stopped doing some of his stuff that we hired him for. And we're like, all right, well, we're not going to like, just do you, man. And so like just make enough value that it justifies it. And like that's kind of the culture that we've created at Bankless. And so we're trying to find what's downhill for every single individual, just like what feels super easy for you. Now the negative externality of that is like sometimes just like a list of to-dos doesn't get done. And so like now we have to go back on the other ways and like find some operators to do this. And that's what we're doing now with scaling out the company. But for me and Ryan, as in like the two people at the top, it's literally like, how do you take the part of you that you don't want to be doing and like delegate that to someone else? And so like it's trying to strike this balance of just like, how do you be an operator, but also how do you make sure that like everyone naturally does their own thing? my natural thing is content. Like I write articles, I make podcasts. It's what I do. And Ryan's definitely much more of an operator than I am. So he finds it much easier just personally. And also he actually went to school for business, unlike me. And so he's just naturally gifted at it. And so like, that's a little bit more downhill for him. But like we have Bankless's product is content. What am I good at? I'm really good at content. And so there's like two parts of my like abilities. I could go and like I could try to be an operator at the company and we could like, you know, grow out another wing and build another product. Or I could just do what I love, which is make a fuck ton of content and like have the Bankless machine just like spit out money on the other side. And so like that's what I do.
It's about to get a lot better with that sexy studio as well and that lighting. So
should I turn on party mode?
Yeah, please
see
do.
Party mode.
So David's about to turn on some sex lighting.
Yeah, you're watching on you're watching on YouTube.
Ooh,
wow.
Yep.
Damn.
That's a closing note.
Got some
Or
disco
just a disco.
colors.
It could just be a disco party, whatever you want.
Is that the venue for the merge party?
This is the POV, the merge party.
Yes, that looks like a great little dance floor.
That's incredible.
Party.
That's incredible. So just to wrap with one more thing on Bankless, David. So obviously you know, everywhere you go, people are like, hey, you know, meet my friend David. He knows all about crypto. And then, you know, somebody new, a kind of newbie normie person is like, yeah, I'm looking to learn more about the space. I'm looking to get involved. It's like you years ago. You obviously have the ability to say, well, you should check out Bankless. That's a very easy answer. But if you couldn't say Bankless, what would you say? What's your favorite resource to recommend to people to get started?
If I couldn't say Bankless, Ethereum.org is pretty good actually. Once upon a time, Ethereum.org was pretty terrible, and like it was kind of like an inside joke of the Ethereum crowd. I was like, haha. Want to know a funny joke? Ethereum.org. But like it's actually gotten a lot better now. So Ethereum.org is actually a really, really good resource. At this point in crypto, to give a little like finesse to the answer, if I do say so myself, I'll say like there's different parts of crypto that you would get attracted to. So like, are you here for NFTs? Are you here for DeFi? Like what's your sector? And I would probably like spit out a specific resource for them based on their answer for that one, just because of how like specialized crypto has become.
Okay. I actually shared an Ethereum.org article in the chat the other day and in the Discord the other day. And I agree. I was learning about like staking through Ethereum.org, looking into like SaaS solutions. Breakdown's really good. The site feels very modern these days.
The correct answer, what I would say to them is like, your goal should be to be able to understand Anthony Cesano's Daily Gwei. But I would never send a person straight there. That would be like ridiculous. But I would tell them like, if you can get to the point where you can listen to Anthony Cesano and you understand it, you've ended up at the right conclusion. But you should find your way there by like studying what he says. But like that's like really throwing them into the deep end. But it's the right advice. Yeah,
I'm glad you didn't say listen to the Alfalfa Round and learn about skincare. By the way, so let's shift gears to the merge. And we're going to try and do this a little bit differently because, you know, you've talked about the merge endlessly. Listeners are well versed in this to a certain degree. Not enough. So that's what we're going to try and do. We're going to try and go at a bit of a different angle in this. And obviously there are some really common rebuttals around the merge. And you guys published Jordy Alexander's article, which was fantastic. And then you obviously had a response to it, which was fantastic. But there's this first point here that I thought we could just open up with this buy the rumor, sell the news aspect that kind of encompasses the whole argument. How do you feel about that?
Yes, yeah. This is, I feel like, actually pretty easy to handle as a question. Everyone is worried about the supply overhang, right? Or is that what you're talking about? Or just buy the rumor, sell the news?
However you want to take it, but it's specifically
the merge is the merge. A lot of people think the merge is a classic crypto sell the news event, like every other event in crypto. Let's be honest.
Right. Okay. Now, anytime I'm bullish on Ethereum and everyone is like, "Oh, sell the news," I'm like, "Yeah, but what if it's wrong? What if it's not that this time?" And like, even whether I'm right or wrong, I'm always like that. Like, but what about not? What about the opposite of that? Like, I know you're trying to be the contrarian, but like, aren't you? Can I be the contrarian to the contrarian? And all really the markets are really just like a straight up hall of mirrors, right? Well, they want this much, so I'll ask this much, so they'll ask this much, so they'll ask this much, and so it's just like a what do they know that I know that they know that I know kind of relationship. And so, it's like, how levels deep contrarian do you want to be? And if my bias is, if it's bullish about Ethereum, I'm always the one that's like, well, if you're saying it's like this, I'm going to say it's like the bullish side. Now, crypto, throughout all of crypto's history, this is the biggest event ever. Maybe since the launch of Ethereum, but like, even if it was, that you wouldn't be able to trade that. You would just be able to be a pre-sale investor. This is the biggest event in crypto's history. It's also an event that is fundamentally about price and value and scarcity. So not only is it the biggest event, but it's the biggest event about the value of Ether. This is what the merge is. Like the relationship between how to make a blockchain secure and how to make a currency valuable is a one-to-one relationship. And so some people, if you're open source Ethereum core dev, you say we're shifting to proof of stake because of the better security model. So maybe you say it's because it's more efficient, but that's also the same thing. But like when I, as an investor, as a money person, I see like, oh, you think security? I think we're making Ether 100 times more scarce. We're making 100 times more valuable. That is what the merge is. It's like whether you appreciate it from the proof of stake or the security or the number of money go up, it's the same thing 3 different times. And so you're gonna sell that as the news. Like it's sure, sell any catalyst as the news, but like this is the biggest catalyst in crypto's history. And so that's the one you're going to sell the news on. Like if there's ever a window in crypto for buy the rumor, sell the news to not be true, it's this one.
Man, I hope Squish Chaos's original thesis is correct, and we get a $150,000 ETH. That doesn't look so good right now, Squish.
Was there a timeline on that?
Yeah, last year.
It was end of
Granted, his prediction on that was created probably with like an estimated late 2020, early 2021 merge. That wouldn't have gotten us 150,000.
I mean, the biggest thing I learned from the Squish Chaos piece was that it pays to be just uberly retardedly bullish, like with just no, like you get all the PR, you get all the
look
all
at the success of Bankless podcast.
So kudos to him on that. I mean, I'm curious to get your take, like from like a devil's advocate sort of perspective. As you know, I'm a little more of a trader than you are, and right. I don't know to what degree I'm going to be selling the merge or if I am, but like I do have it as a default in my head that it is a bit of a sell the news event, because when I look at it after it happens, right, I think the argument that it's not exactly priced in is good. I think that the argument that when it actually happens and it's not a disaster, people go, oh shit, and there will be buying pressure coming in from that, right? So I do want to wait for that at least, but in my head I'm like, okay, but then what? What happens next? Like we're years away from sharding, right? We have no activity on NFTs right now. L2s are obviously sucking up a lot of the demand for gas on L1, which I think is long-term bullish, but like probably, short, midterm bearish from like a burn perspective. And the issuance reduction, which I think you and I talked a little bit about this in Spaces. I totally agree that over like 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years, like that's a big deal. Like $20 million a day in, day out for years is going to make a big difference. But like we do what, like 20 or 30 billion a day in volume. What is 20 million on that? Like that's sort of my main concern. And I know that Hal on your pod like sort of backed out, like a lot of that volume was maybe arbitrage, and there's actually maybe like a few billion a day that is actually sort of, delta up and down. But still, to me, that's like my main concern, like the lack of activity right now and the minimal impact from the issuance, just, the months immediately after. So I'm just curious here what you would say to that.
Yeah. So the beginning of your question was like, well, what next after the merge? Like, what's the next like bullish thing? Data sharding isn't going to happen on Ethereum for like 18 months, best case scenario, blah, blah, blah. Like, where's the next catalyst? But like, I'll go back to what I was saying before. It's the most bullish event in crypto's history. It is the catalyst, right? Like once the merge happens, all you have to do is wait. And like the thing about 4844 data sharding, or the thing about like whatever next catalyst that you're like asking for, it's not like data sharding is like, sweet, we actually get cheaper transactions on the Ethereum layer 1, and layer 2s get even cheaper than that. But it's like less, it's missing again the point of the merge is, it's such a, the merge is the thing that like once it happens, all you do is wait, and like eventually time is on your side. And the thing about what I was talking to Nick Carter, I was talking to Nick Carter about this today. The reason why bull markets end is because proof of work. So if you're a miner, you're receiving proof of work rewards denominated in your blockchain's asset. And so that means as your bull market happens and Ether went up 40,000%, you guys know that Ether went up 40,000% from $80 to $4,900, something like that. I might be doing the math wrong on that. But like because of proof of work revenue also went up 40,000%. Or like whatever the percentage is. So the percentage price increase on a US dollar term to the percentage price increase of miner revenue goes up 1-to-1. And so that means that miners, as the price of an asset increase, miners have equivalently more ammo to sell. They are getting their fire hose become stronger on a 1-to-1 relationship as the US dollar price of the asset. And actually it gets even worse because blockchain becomes congested. So not only are they making block rewards, but they are also making hella high fees. And so technically, actually, because fees always come with bull markets, their fire hose of like flows of like how much US dollar revenue they're making actually increases on a leveraged fashion to the US dollar price of the asset. Miners end bull markets because people can't come into the ecosystem fast enough than the flows of the miner cell pressing fire hose is. And it's like at the beginning of a bull market, before the miner cell pressure hose has really like accrued power, then the new retail investors can totally overwhelm that fire hose. But the fire hose always catches up because it's always sustainably 1-to-1 latched to the US dollar price of the asset because they have to sell 100%. The supply reduction is also the inversion of this, in that Ether stakers are fundamentally on a competition with each other to receive a lower and lower yield of ETH. And so because the more stakers there are, the more ETH stake there is, the yields go down because the yields are spread across a wider set of people. And so as yields go down, it's because more people are staking. And so people are in a competition to be more bullish with each other. As in like, oh, you'll take 3% yields, I'll take 2.5% yields. I'll take 2% yields because I'm so fucking bullish on ETH that I'll take the lowest amount of yield possible and I'll out yield you. And so these people are fundamentally the people that aren't selling their yields because they need that compound interest because they're already competing on very slim margins with other ETH stakers. So that means that this proof of stake merge is the inversion of the fire hose. It's like things dry up faster in bull markets. And so the point of this is that the significance of the merge catalyst is so big that the asking what the next catalyst is like, it doesn't even matter because even if there is another catalyst, it's going to be drowned out by the first catalyst. The catalyst is so big. It's huge.
So you kind of mentioned that in response to, I think it was Jordy's comment that fees are down badly. And, right. There's more gas efficient code. Layer 2s are doing well. And I agree that obviously the issuance is a much bigger catalyst than ETH becoming potentially deflationary. But let's say ETH doesn't become deflationary. Is ETH at that point still, ultrasound money? Can it live out that meme if, let's say layer 2s take off, we get even more efficient. Right. I know you mentioned that the threshold for deflationary is relatively low, but if we don't reach that, is it still ultrasound money?
Yeah, it depends on what you want to define ultrasound money as, right? So like ultrasound money, definitely in my mind, the concrete definition of means that is going more than what we call like also the ultrasound barrier. But these are just like loose meme terms. Ultrasound barrier is 15 ETH. Right. So like, yeah, if you want to be a supersonic money, you have to be past the barrier. So yeah, if you want to be ultrasound, you got to be 15 Gwei or higher. But also the idea about like proof of stake, and specifically the proof of stake, the flavor of proof of stake that also optimizes for decentralization, is simultaneously optimizing for the most scarce money model in crypto economics possible. We have proof of stake assets already with Avalanche and Solana. I'm going to quickly pull up moneyprinter.info. and tell you their inflation rate. Ether inflation rate currently 4%, will go down to 0.48%. Avalanche is already proof of stake and it's at 5%. Solana is already at proof of stake and it's 6.7%. Why are these yields, or these inflation rates so much higher? It's because they haven't optimized for decentralization, and the amount of issuance that you need to create is also a function of decentralization. The more decentralization you have, the less block space there is. The less block space there is, the less security you have to pay for that block space. Block space is the thing that you have to protect. If you have less block space because you're highly decentralized, you don't have to issue your currency very much to pay for that protection. And so the proof of stake blockchain that also optimizes for decentralization is the fundamentally theoretical maximum of scarcity for an asset. And so that is the theoretical maximum of, and then you also combine EIP 1559, which is again, a market-driven phenomenon that emergently discovers how much ether can we burn and still be safe. And then you have the equilibrium of security with proof of stake. We have this, and then we have this optimization for decentralization. So we have this theoretically maximally scarce asset. And so maybe that thing isn't deflationary post-burn, but I'll argue that like, because it's at the theoretical maximum, if there's anything deflationary, it's that. Because you cannot be any more deflationary than the theoretical max deflation.
So its relative soundness is maximal compared to all of these other crypto assets.
Can I interject with like just I think this is a stupid question, but like this is where my mind goes. And oftentimes my stupid questions are actually good, but like I think it's probably stupid. But like, you know, on one hand, like it depends where you're sitting, because like one man's supply increase is another man's income, right? If you're staking, you actually capture that yield. So like you call AVAX a 5% supply increase, but that's actually a yield to a staker, and like a 6 whatever you mentioned on Solana. It's like, well, I might actually prefer a yield that's double ETHs if I'm going to stake.
Right. So in Avalanche and Solana's yields, what's not in that yield, that's not yield, that's issuance. And so yield is something actually probably higher than that.
But don't they, I mean, isn't that what they're giving to stakers and that's how the coins come out? Like,
no, it's a function of how much they're issuing divided by the total supply. And then the total supply is held by a certain amount of stakers, but not all of them. And so the yield is actually higher than the issuance because the issuance is only going to a smaller subset of stakers. So it's like, say the yield is 6% and say stakers own 50% of the supply. Then yield is actually 12%, making the real yield 6%.
Yeah, because not everyone is staking. That makes sense. Okay.
Right.
Right. But even still, like, I guess my overall thought is like, you know, if you're chain agnostic and you are just trying to capture a yield by staking, like, you know, if everyone's competing to go lower on ETH and that is like 3%, 2.9, 2.8, and like I can capture a 6-something% yield on Solana, then it ultimately comes down to like, where's the volume going to play out on the chain? And like, you know, there's a lot of volume on Solana. There's a lot of volume on AVAX.
Right. Okay. So this is just like, you know, Gresham's law. Gresham's law is bad money drives out, or good money drives out bad money. Like the reason why a Solana or Avalanche yield is higher is basically they're paying you to be more bullish. It's like the bond market. So Avalanche has to pay their stakers 6% to convince them to provide security. The Ethereum protocol only has to pay their stakers 3% to provide security. Ethereum has a cheaper cost of capital because people are more trusting in the market and trusting in the asset that's backing that yield. And it's a flight to security. And so like, think of like an Avalanche yield as like a junk bond. Like, yeah, they got to pay you extra percentage because there's hella more risk associated with that. And so like you see one, like you don't really want to compete on Ether's yield. You want to compete on the holder base. You want to be able to provide. It's the same like truism of any nation state with a money printer. When your currency is more strong than others, the issuance of your money printer means more. And so actually the fact that like Avalanche or Solana have to inflate their currency at a faster rate means that their store of valueness of their currency is going away at a faster rate, which is disincentivizing the holder base of their currency at a faster rate. And that can spiral out of control, at least on a relative basis towards Ether, the asset that has an extremely efficient cost of capital for its own security.
So let's skip a little bit to some macro components. So how do you fit macro into your mental model of the ETH trade? A lot of things we've talked about in recent podcasts is like net liquidity affecting crypto assets, and you mentioned cycles, and I think we would apply net liquidity to cycles going up and down. You also have the U.S. dollar going up. You maybe have some form of recession, coming in. We're not sure how deep or whatnot. So how does that fit into your mental model right now?
Yeah, macros where I'll start to be just like, this is outside of my area, and I just kind of regurgitate the macro people that we have on the podcast. Although I will contend that does make me decently informed by macro, regardless of the YouTube comments that say that Ryan and David need to stop talking about macro because it's not our camp.
I agree with you, man. Well, taking in all of those various macro takes actually makes yours more sound to me.
Right.
So I've been studying finance my entire life, and what I've found a commonality is that like many of us are having to learn macro now
by force. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And also, like, just on that note, like, it's always been in crypto's destiny to become macro. Like, that's always been the point.
Sure.
And so, like, there was one, like, after our macro series, like, we had some naysayers in YouTube comments, they're always naysayers. They're like, Ryan and David need to get out, like, get back in their lane and stick to crypto. It's like, no, like, crypto, the whole point about crypto is that we become macro. And so I told Ryan, I was like, yeah, Bankless is a macro podcast, because crypto is a macro conversation. And then he was like, oh yeah, the way that you said that just scared me, actually. I think that's what he said. But then also, like, that's kind of cool, right? It's kind of exciting.
We got some haters too, by the way. They mostly just comment on what we wear.
Yeah, Steven's shirts are too tight. Yeah. We noticed. The commenters noticed.
and just for all being very good looking. But yeah.
So, as we kind of merge into the macro, ETH does, mainstream media is going to start to pick this up more and more, and they're starting to. There are a lot of positive narratives that can come after the merge, and I'm curious, what do you think will be mainstream media's like biggest narrative that they'll pick up? There's the deflationary part, there's the yield part, that there's the less electricity, less energy narrative. Which one do you think they will pick up first, and which one do you think might actually move the price of ETH when they actually start to pick this up? And I'm talking about mainstream financial media, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, those kind of things.
I think price moves first, and that's why they start talking about it. Like, that seems like the news and content is like they don't create, they report on. Like that world is lags. That just like answers to demand. So the price has to move first, and then they'll talk about it. And so, like, why? So, like, say Ether jumps to like $3,000 in November or December, which it will.
Yeah, fact. This is fact.
Oh, facts. I'm looking into the future right now. Like, what is CNBC saying about Ether? And depending on how fast it happens after the merge, like if it happens within like 6 months after the merge, then like even mainstream media is smart enough to connect those dots, I'd say. And so like they'll give you the whole spiel of like, oh yeah, it's they'll probably say like it's the update that made Ethereum green and that's why people are buying it. They'll probably make some stupid mistake like that. But like it's adjacent enough where I'm not going to complain too much.
I agree. That's the first one they're going to pick up on, and they're already starting to mention it. And so, there's going to be this bullshit ESG narrative on why people are buying it. And I think to some extent it may play out.
Well, it feels good. Sounds good.
It does feel
good.
Nice.
Yeah. But you don't see a
energy reduction.
Right. Yeah. And you don't see a world in which a narrative that takes place in mainstream media actually has an effect on price. You don't see it going the other way around.
This last bull market was based off of culture, right? Like the DeFi bull market was decent in 2020, but it was the NFT bull market put that thing to shame. I don't see people getting excited about layer one assets for a little bit. That's my gut take. I don't know.
Well, I could see just to play counter to that. It's like if you're talking about macro, right? Like the narratives around inflation, liquidity, Fed moves, these have all impacted ETH's price independent of what ETH is doing. So this is a situation where like narrative is affecting price, the other way around.
I see that working at the like trad institution level, and for people who have since the last year or so have like maybe longer have like woken up to crypto, like, oh, crypto's here. Remember we had that Terra thing that like scared the pants out of like a lot of people in the trad world. But like there's a decent, I mean, it's not like it's going to be the thing, but like every time there's a big win, we win over hearts and minds of people, right? And if a really big win is Ether's real yield is 4 to 6% in a world where the real yields of the dollar are negative like 5 to 8%. And like that doesn't have to be that true for that long to that be picked up by a decent cohort of money managers. And like the ones like, okay, like let me lean into this. And like it's no different than the people that did it like last bear market. I don't really think there's going to be this big wave. I think there's going to be a long crescendo that is what we call the 2024 bull market.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about some yields, because some of our listeners are staking and yielding, and we've talked about other strategies like selling calls as a way to earn yield on your ETH. Just curious, like, do you have any other ways that like, is there any other ways to earn yield off of ETH other than staking that you've found interesting or compelling recently outside of just staking?
Yeah, I would like to get good at, just to keep good at, there was once upon a time where I was like a daily DeFi user and I was like good at DeFi. And now I'm good at boomer DeFi, and I'm not so good at like newer DeFi because I replaced newer DeFi with like content stuff mostly. And so there's Volts protocol. Are you guys familiar?
No.
In Volts, it's a interest rate swap, AMM. Cool story about the genesis is that Uniswap v3 has its license still attached to it. Mm-hmm. So it's a permission license for like 3 years. And I think 1.5 of those years are up. So Volts is an interest rate AMM. So not a token AMM, an interest rate AMM. And so but they wanted to use Uniswap v3 as their code. But they had the license on it. So Volts said, hey, Uniswap DAO, we will give you 1% of tokens and we can use your license. And the Uniswap DAO said yes. And so Uniswap DAO has 1% of Volts tokens. And now the Uniswap v3 code is in this interest rate swap AMM. And so you can trade interest rates up to the maximum leverage that Uniswap v3 can give you, which is, I think, like infinity. I think they market it at 3,000%. And so it's like the curve of interest rates, the liquidity of interest rates.
Can't imagine anyone getting wrecked on this.
Well, it's pretty sophisticated, right? But all you're really doing is you are gambling on the relative yield of time. And so like, will yield go up in the future or will it go down in the future? And it lets you take significant leverage to gamble on those yields. So it's both degenerate in that you can get like 3,000x, but it's very, very sophisticated and not degenerate. What's the opposite of degenerate? Like good.
Good boy.
Conservative. Good boy. It's very like it's sophisticated, but you are just gambling on yield, and so you make money on yield, and so it's just a matter of like what your yield goes up to or down, and so it's a way to bet on the future yield of protocols. And so like it's a yield futures market. It's a leveraged yield futures market, but it's an AMM on Ethereum.
Sorry, just because I've never heard of this protocol. This is yields in DeFi, or is this like are we talking like Fed rate curve yields?
No, yield on the Ethereum protocol, starting with the ETH yield because it's native to Ethereum, so super easy. And then like the next yields that'll come after that are like DAI yields. But like anything with a sufficiently liquid yield market, they can make a interest rate swap mechanism. Yeah, interest rate swaps. That's what it is. I mean, the interest rate swaps of TradFi are bajillions of dollars,
and
right?
it's called Volt.
Literally quadrillion dollars is interest rate swap mechanism of TradFi.
VOLTS?
ZTZ. Yeah. Cool. And so like I can't remember the details of it. I wrote a tactic on this in the newsletter. If you want to check it out, David Hoffman Volts should get it to you.
Hell yeah.
Bankless. But like, yeah, if you want to gamble on the future state of yield on Ether, like you would use Volts and you can take a bunch of leverage on it.
All right.
So Dave, one more thing on kind of the merge and then we'll transition out of that. But something that I personally really care about, and I think that there's a lot of people out there that it's nothing more than merge FUD. They're clout chasing. They're putting out content just for the sake of getting likes and retweets and things like that around.
Is this person name's Checkmatey?
Well, let's talk about that. So let's go right into that, actually. So let's go right into that. The point being, I think there are some takes out there that are garbage, and others where there might be some good points in there. And obviously in our text thread, this came up. Stephen feels that there are some interesting aspects to the positions that Checkmate lays out. My question for you is, and maybe Stephen, if you'd feel free to add to this, my question for you is, if you had to steelman this,
the merge.
Well, no.
Steelman,
if you had to steelman
Checkmate's position against the merge.
Censorship, I guess, right?
Yeah, specifically around censorship. What do you think his best points are in general?
Oh, I haven't listened to him. You think I've watched that YouTube video?
Okay, so like
I can imagine what his arguments are, and I think they're probably
all right, let's
like
get imaginative.
the fact that Coinbase and Lido together have like just such a big portion of ETH staked
it's so dumb.
Is centralized. I think that's a main point.
I think there are some legitimate concerns.
You guys are asking me a question that's going to make me rant for like 12 minutes straight.
He's gearing up. He's sitting up in his seat.
He's getting closer.
We didn't even mention why he's a posture king.
Why did you just
physical
why did you
therapy
just loosen up your
background?
belt? What's going on?
Oh man. Okay, he's looking right at the camera now. All right, he's in it. What,
All right. Oh, okay. We're doing this. All right.
You give us a little something, and maybe Stephen, if you have a more specific question around that position,
I mean, my general take from listening to you, from listening to the Drake episode, is you seem like close to 0%. I think worried about some sort of ETH censorship happening, some sort of like institutional government capture of the network, right?
Yeah.
So I actually wanted to ask you Armand's question in a way, because I think one of the things that I like about you guys is that you are not sort of just super blindly like cultish about ETH, even though I know people like to portray you that way on Twitter. I appreciate that you had Jordy write that article to try to steelman the argument against it, which
people love.
Think is great. Yeah, no, it's super useful. So, I mean, I'm just curious, like, what you think the best points that people make about censorship are. Like, if you really had a gun to your head, do you think are the most critical vulnerabilities
or existential threats?
Even if you think that's only 1%, like what is it?
Right. It's always a function of time, and I think one of the reasons why people are like David and Ryan are like permabulls on ETH and they can't see the opposite point of view is that me and Ryan fast forward like 5 to 10 years and look at the future state of Ethereum, and we generally argue from that position, as in like I'm not worried about this because like in the future there's this thing called proposer builder separation, and that removes like the block proposer ability to censor, right? In the future, there's these things called CR lists, which are censorship resistant lists, which are lists of transactions that a proposer passes to the builder and say, hey, you must include these transactions. And the builder's like, I must oblige. There's also things like we can ZK snark the mempool and hide the transactions. And so like then you can't censor those. And so like to me, like all of these are answered questions. They are not yet implemented. And this is also, I think, a fundamental difference that I think a lot of people in the crypto space take, and where a lot of like disagreement comes from is like, what time frame are we talking about here? Because a lot of the Ethereum naysayers, the Ethereum bears, are like, Lido and Coinbase have too much stake, and they're totally right. They totally do. Where I'll start to differ with them is say that like, yeah, and they're going to use it to censor the protocol. I'm like, no, they're not. They have the best interest in the protocol like at heart. Why would they? The intent in the same way that like miners are never going to harm Bitcoin, anybody who's a staker is not going to harm Ethereum. Like Coinbase, where do you think the majority of its revenue comes from? It's from Ethereum and the associated ecosystems. So like they're on our side. And like the circle that had to like freeze the Tornado Cash USDC, they didn't want to do that. And if they had wanted to do it, they would have done it before OFAC asked them to, not afterwards. Or they didn't ask them to, but they did it anyways. And so like when Checkmate argues and these people argue, they're coming from a place of just like, and I guess it's a good place to come from where like everything's going to attack you. Like everything is going to come after you, and so you need to be hyper secure. And so they're really going after like the most low-hanging fruit. And right now, the most low-hanging fruit is like Lido and Coinbase in this particular perspective. And so, okay, but to fairly answer your question and not just argue, what is the most the biggest window of opportunity for censorship to go into the Ethereum chain? What's that?
Yeah.
It's that it's the app layers on the Ethereum ecosystem the apps on the app layer all don't have a spine, and they over comply themselves without like as an unforced error, like a big own goal in the Ethereum app layer. That's what I'm worried about. And we start doing things.
And we saw an example of that, right?
Well, we saw a lot of them.
That's exactly the concern. I think all the FUD around like Coinbase and Lido are going to fucking, hand it over is stupid. Like they don't have any incentive to do that. But I think the concern is when the law is at play, people don't want to go to jail. Yes, and they immediately are like, well, I got a life, I got a family, I got enough ETH. Here you go.
I'm out. Yeah. That's right.
And that's the concern.
Yeah. And like the app layer of Ethereum is fundamentally like not as decentralized as the actual protocol itself. I mean, rightfully so. The thing that's at the bottom should always be the most decentralized. And so like, it's probably why the overreaction happened on the app layer first, but also like, both highly relevantly and also adjacently, like DAOs need to get their shit together, yo.
Yeah.
Like they need to actually become DAOs, and they need to become geographically and jurisdictionally decentralized while also becoming like operationally centralized. And that's like the hard needle to thread. Like this whole like bottom up organization is total bullshit. And these things need to be run as companies, and they need to be run as supranational, is that right? Like extra national companies.
Right.
Like they do not exist in any nation state, and they need to like hire like legal and tax lawyers to like shore up these DAOs and remove all surface area so these things can like operate. Who is the guy doing that? Like there was that sailboat off of like the British Isles or something that was running Pirate Bay, I think. Like all DAOs need to figure out how to like do this. And all that means is like, nation state, like don't piss off any nation state. Like how do we make sure that we don't show up on any nation state's radar? Like DAOs need like stealth operators that there's like, what we do is we don't hide from nation states. We hide from nation states. And we do that not by like being invisible, but I mean, just like not pissing off any regulator by being compliant or like doing whatever, just like figuring out how to make DAOs operate. And at that point in time, then we can start like collecting revenue and dishing that revenue out to like employees of that DAO, workers of that DAO, contributors. And like in 10, 15, 20 years from now, we might actually be able to like pass out revenue to token holders. But that's what the app layer needs to become super censorship resistant.
Out of the DAO, I think they got the O right so far, and that's about it. Like the A part is probably lacking the most, and the D part is still.
Organization? Are you sure? I'm not sure about it.
The autonomous part is the weakest part, and the decentralization.
If you want to create something beautiful, great, outstanding, you want it to scale, you need a dictator.
Yeah,
you really need coordination. So
coordination's tight.
Yeah. I have a little question outside of ETH. We can kind of move on. Yeah. It's about Bitcoin, and I've heard you joke. In jest that you could possibly make a better bull case for Bitcoin than Bitcoiners. And I want to know if you could give us a little sliver of that. What would that look like? What would be the better bull case for Bitcoin than Bitcoiners can make?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the frame of mind I said that in. So like the Bitcoiner
Steve bull case.
The Bitcoiner bull case is like the fundamental thing about Bitcoin is the 21 million units. Like Bitcoin can, according to like deep Bitcoin zealotry thought, like what Bitcoin is it's not the blockchain, it's not the miners, it's not proof of work, it's 21 million units. And so like Bitcoin itself can like transpose itself in any other way other than 21 million units, and that's what Bitcoin is. And so like the bull case for Bitcoin is that this unit of account is so fundamentally strong that it actually does shed all of the liabilities of the Bitcoin blockchain, the Bitcoin asset. And the liabilities of the Bitcoin asset is everything that's not fucking the asset. So shed the blockchain, shed proof of work, become 21 million units. Like as the blockchain like emits all the Bitcoins, there's like some sort of like bridge, and we've talked about it, like bridge onto Ethereum, bridge onto Cosmos, figure out some sort of mechanism for some interchain layer, and Bitcoin becomes the unit of account of this like network of blockchains that people think Cosmos is, which is not saying it's not. But there's 21 million units just like permeates throughout the block sphere, the blockiverse. and the Bitcoin blockchain is gone. Like it's totally gone, and the 21 million units like get uploaded into the metaverse.
This went in a completely different direction.
I'm gonna have to re-listen to this.
So you're saying get rid of your hopes and dreams about being a currency. Get rid of your hopes and dreams about having some activity, economic activity on the blockchain. The most powerful thing, the thing that you hold most true, and the thing that compels price and value around the asset is this fixed 21 million. So just roll with that.
Just go straight there. Just immediately go to 21 and then.
Yeah.
And so in that scenario, do you not have to worry about the security portion of
Yeah, that's why this really breaks down.
Right.
Is that there's a missing component here about like how do we create a shared source of truth without a blockchain?
Right. But I like it. That's new. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, the concept of uploading Bitcoin to Ethereum has been like actually discussed and like hypothecated on. And so like if it went to Ethereum, if there was like a canonical like this is the Bitcoin bridge to Ethereum, and then it just existed on Ethereum as like an ERC20, like that would be good.
I kind of feel like once you do that, like the argument for why Bitcoin, like a lot of the Bitcoiner arguments, like if you accept that you could upload Bitcoin to ETH, which obviously they wouldn't, right? But it seems like a lot of their arguments would be. Like you're obviously familiar with like Rye and Reflexer, right? Like that to me sounds like better than Bitcoin because like a lot of what Bitcoiners say sounds like actually it should just be a stable coin. Like a lot of people who they say want Bitcoin actually really need stability. They don't want to lose 90% of their value over time. So something like Rye that is basically like decentralized stability outside of the dollar. That kind of seems like what they're trying to do. But you obviously have to get to a point where the ETH blockchain itself is sufficiently decentralized, which obviously Bitcoiners would say is not the case today, but you're thinking 10 years out, as you say.
Right. Yeah. Well, the problem with that is like one of the, I'm pretty sure what's core to like Bitcoin TM belief is that BTC, the asset, must pump forever, which is also convenient because that's the only way that the Bitcoin security model also works. And so like, and they use that as like a marketing term is like, yeah, Bitcoin just goes up forever. And that's why people buy it is because it's known to go up because everything else, the idea is that like Bitcoin isn't actually going up in price. Bitcoin is staying the same price at all times. And more people are selling you more things for that Bitcoin. And so like Bitcoin becomes a unit account for like everything. And like as the world just like becomes on a Bitcoin standard, like they just denominate, like people are just willing to sell you more things for like the same amount of Bitcoin. And so, where was I going with that? Yeah, the idea is like Bitcoin just pumps forever relative to all physical assets on the. That's why they have the 21 million, infinity divided by 21 million units. That meme, like that's where that comes from. Is like it's in the Bitcoin like narrative is that this thing just pumps forever.
Cool. And if it doesn't, they're proper fucked.
If it doesn't, then the blockchain thing. Okay, so never mind. I don't want to go.
Yeah. No, we don't have to give it that much energy.
On this point of Bitcoin, I think this was something Stephen was thinking about, but I'll just pop in with it. What do you think Bitcoiner's strongest criticism of Ethereum is? I know we're making you play this role so much today, but you're so good at it. Keep it going.
Bitcoiner's strongest criticism of Ethereum. Bitcoiners definitely get like the future relationship that blockchains have with the external world. And so like a decent part of the Ethereum ecosystem was actually blindsided by the whole OFAC thing. And so the Bitcoiners come in and say, ha ha ha, like we told you so. And so like the Bitcoiner perspective is like I said earlier, everything and everyone is going to come to attack you eventually. And so like that is what Bitcoin itself is built around. And so like when Ethereum is like off doing like La La Land DeFi NFT things and then like, oh fuck, OFAC, I forgot about that. Bitcoiners are like, you guys are idiots. Like we saw this coming like years and years ago. And so the biggest criticism of Ethereum is that like our fascination with like unicorns and rainbows like leaves us vulnerable to attack by nation states.
I agree with that. I think Bitcoin.
I'm happy to defend against that, but like I think that's a fair and valid criticism.
And I think Bitcoin has been Bitcoiners have been right on macro for a long time. The implementation.
And I've said this before, and then other people have given me the rebuttal that like yes, and a broken clock is right twice a day. Like so many people are inflation bears and macro bears and nation state bears that like the moment that like COVID happens, like, yes, you get to count yourself as right now.
Yeah, very true. Steven, do you want to go into the stuff, or should we end with the lightning round here?
I mean, that was definitely one of the big questions I wanted to ask. I mean, I got a bunch of others for you. I'm curious. What was the thing you got most wrong in the last bull run, as far as like predictions, narratives you thought would play out?
Yeah, so Bankless as a brand kind of took a beating from June in the second half of 2021. And that's because like we declined the alt layer 1 narrative. We were like, this doesn't make sense. We also lost track of DeFi at the time. Like DeFi had reached a frontier that was like beyond us, and we were like appearing like bull market boomers because like I didn't know who Danny Sessa was. And like people were like, do you guys remember who Danny Sessa was?
Oh yeah.
Frog Nation.
Okay.
RIP.
Frog Nation. Right. And so like we got in trouble for that. Is like, not only are you not covering Solana, you're not covering Avalanche, you're not covering your own DeFi ecosystem because you don't know who Danny Sessa is. Like, what the fuck is going on, Bankless? Like, what are you guys focused on? Like, David's off talking about culture for the last 3 months. Like, Jesus Christ. And so like that, and we got really preachy and really like a little bit holier than thou, I'd say, about like, no, you got to use Ethereum. I literally wrote an article that says Binance has no soul, and like talking about Binance Smart Chain.
Yeah.
And so what we missed is that like gas fees hit 400 Gwei at the peak of the DeFi bull market, and like we weren't sympathetic to that, and like listening to the pain of people like, oh, Bankless is like telling me to like do Uniswap, but like Uniswap's cost me $50 a trade. And like
50.
we just lost touch.
I was saying $600 to enter into a LP position, and it takes like 4 transactions, so $50. Give me a break.
yeah. Well, this is what I'm talking about. This is the exact reaction that like we apparently triggered a bunch like in the second half of the bull market. It's like we weren't listening to people about like, I don't care that Avalanche isn't decentralized. It does things and it's cheap. And like I know this from my personal emotional experience, and like Bankless, like I have never touched Avalanche, so like I don't know. And like everyone's like, oh yeah, Phantom Wallet on Solana, the UX is great. Like still don't know, like haven't experienced it. And so like that was our biggest like mistake in that like, and Kobe got this right. I remember Kobe calling this out is like his biggest bet going into 2021 is that block space is going to become scarce, and so you got to buy the alt layer 1s. And I was like, you know what I'm bullish on? People learning about the values of decentralization and the core idea of Ethereum. Like I'm bullish on people learning that. Like, so that was wrong. Yeah.
I love that. I love your ability to say that. I think it comes from a place that Bankless has such an incredible couple guys that put out brilliant content, and they just want your analysis and take on these other aspects of crypto. I think it comes from a very good place, but it also is very exciting in a way to build community, to be incredibly bullish on your favorite asset. But I love that you have the ability to look at that. And speaking of, it's like a lot of our listeners, a lot of everyone watching, we know this, they're very entrepreneurial, or they have some sort of entrepreneurial dream. And more, being a content creator is a path toward freedom, abundance, crypto as an asset in your wallet. Like you have so many opportunities that you've built, David Hoffman, as a result of just being one of the guys at Bankless. Deal flow comes your way. You build sponsorship revenue. You build a reputation. It's like you incorporated. That said, if you're speaking to a friend and you had to start all over again, what would you do differently starting Bankless now? Because I think a lot of people have a lot of wisdom to gain from how to go into becoming a content creator, podcaster in the best way possible today.
That's a good question. I would have to, in order to give you a good answer, I'd have to actually really think on that one. I mean, there's like lessons that I now know as a podcaster that's got 3 years of experience under his belt, and then also a business operator that's got 2 years of experience under his belt, that like, oh yeah, like I would have started the YouTube faster. I would have like, reformatted this thing faster. I would have just like leaned into it a little bit more. Like sometimes I like make a bunch of podcasts and like I forget about like the if there's 3 hours of labor coming out of a podcast, like I can fix that sooner and I'll turn that into 1 hour. But as like a basic structure of a company, I don't really know, because the cool thing about Bankless is that we've taken guidance on like where we take this thing like one quarter at a time. And when we can focus on the quarter, it's like the second half of Thursday and Friday, because the first part of the week we are taking Bankless like 2 weeks at a time. Like this is the content calendar. This is who we're having on. And so like, you know, the Wallace and Gromit meme of like Wallace is like laying down, or Gromit's laying down the tracks while he's on the train. Like, especially during the bull market, that's what it was. And so we made our, like, how do we want to pivot our direction about anything was always made with a 2-week leeway. And eventually we started hiring, like, all right, let's focus and like think 1 quarter out. But during the bull market, it was such like tunnel vision that making significant decisions about like the long-term scope never became relevant, because we never had a moment to think. And that was, I think, the correct choice, because like we penetrated the market of content so aggressively that I think we've just like shut down so much competition in the podcast space. And there's definitely some competition in the newsletter space. And maybe I'm just like I don't know what I don't know, because like I don't actually listen to that many crypto podcasts. But also I think that's evidence of like kind of what I'm saying. There are some other really good ones. Reveries out there is really, really good.
Yeah, actually, on that note, what are your top 5 favorite podcasts? They don't have to be crypto necessarily.
Uncommon Core, Reverie.
This was a question from the community, by the way.
When I hear those come up on the podcast feed, I always click on those. Anthony Cesano's, although it's not really a podcast, it's Anthony ranting for 30 minutes about how cool Ethereum is. Let's see, other crypto podcasts. That's really the only ones I consistently listen to. I do listen to The Breakdown from NLW. He does a really good job with news reporting. So yeah, all of those.
Any
I want to ask a follow up on 2 questions ago. You mentioned that it was like a bit of blind spot for Bankless, where you didn't acknowledge the alt layer ones. Now that gas fees are low on ETH, do you think there is still a space for alt layer ones in the future of crypto and blockchain technology and everything?
I do not think there's space for monolithic layer ones. So
everything could become like an L2 on ETH's layer 1, perhaps.
An alt layer 1 like Solana or Avalanche could like change its roadmap and then lean into the modular thesis, and then it could stick around. I don't believe that monolithic layer 1s can stick around. Any monolithic layer 1 other than Bitcoin can stick around,
because they would all
be
the same
outcompeted.
Issue of like, more volume means higher gas fees, and they would all go down the same path that ETH layer 1 went down.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
What do you think a narrative is going to be in the next bull run that nobody's really talking about a lot now?
I've always been a fan of the layer 2 mania narrative, in that like layer 2s are like, we've all seen like in the last bull market, you want to make the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time possible. What do? You launch an ETH killer, right? You fork Geth, you launch a blockchain, you get a bunch of VC money, funding. And so like there's this like shelling point, this coordination point on like what is the easiest way to like get a $1 billion valuation on your startup. Eventually, I think it's going to become start an L2, because it's even easier than a layer 1. And Arbitrum token's coming. Our Optimism token's already $6 billion valuation. Like there's already alt layer 1s or alt layer 2s out there. Like I think that there's a world out there where like spinning up your own layer 2 and building it and like that becoming your deck is like pretty significant. Like it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, I got to follow up on that. How much do you feel like a layer 2, or maybe in crypto at large, like how much do you think the actual long game is based around like finding the incentive sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone between public goods funding and like economic activity, and follow up on that is like, do you think that something like Optimism is already sort of like walking into that Goldilocks zone?
Yeah, I think that Goldilocks zone has to be a markets derived zone. I think that's something that only like, because we all know that like capitalism and is like the way that you build out the frontier, right? And so The only thing about retroactive public goods on optimism is that it latches on some sort of basal retroactive public goods funding to capitalistic endeavors. But it's set by the market, I think. That's the whole idea of like retroactive public goods funding, is that particular balance between public goods and like equity upside is emergently derived because of that market mechanism. But I do think it's relatively low. It's something like 5% public goods, 95% equity upside in like a token on a layer 2.
Uh-oh. Where'd you go?
I think we lost David Hoffman. The recording.
Hold on.
Well, your video.
We hear you.
We hear you.
Stay with us.
This is the third time that this has happened.
I'm so surprised it's not on our end.
Oh, we thought for sure we were going to fuck this up on our end.
I don't even know how we pulled this whole thing off.
Uh-oh.
Oh, wow.
It's the camera.
We got an SOP for you that can fix that.
We make our own
We've
SOPs
had that happen plenty of times.
Yeah.
Let's end up with a few lighthearted questions. There was a question in the Discord about asking like, what's a day in your life to keep up with crypto? They were like, how does this man, keep up with everything going on? I mean, you guys definitely do a good job on the roll up, but day in the life, are you in Discords? Are you in Twitter? Where do you spend your time to
How much caffeine do you consume?
Not that much, actually.
No?
I'm really sensitive.
You are a naturally energetic human.
Sometimes I'm like, when I'm alone, I'm like, damn, I'm a naturally like lethargic human.
Maybe you're a people person. Maybe it comes out around people. But no, you come off as someone who is consuming at a high rate. You have a fast processor. And I think that's what people see and feel is how do you consume so much information in an organized way where you don't get overwhelmed and then convert it into amazing content.
Yeah, definitely. It's partly just because of connections, right? Exactly what Telegram or what Discord am I in is a big component of that. Because you can have your own intuitions about what's big news or why a particular piece of news is significant. But when you have like 50 well-informed people in a Discord together, all looking at the same article, coming to the same conclusions, like that's why it seems that way. Like it's not actually only my computation. It's the computation of like entire chat rooms. Like we're all passing an idea back and forth together, like adding our own little, and this is what knowledge is, right? When like somebody learns something, when Newton learns physics and introduces it to the world, we all get to build on that. And so like a chat room is the same kind of model. It's like, here's an article, here's my take on it. I was like, oh, here's your take? Well, here's my take. Like, oh, here's your take, here's my take. It was like, I just have more, like people who think that probably have like normie jobs. And then they're not thinking about like, what happens if you replace 8 hours of your normie job with like reading Discord? Like you would also be informed. But yes, it's Discord and Twitter.
Damn.
Also, like, I remember when I started my own Twitter account versus where my Twitter, like as in who I'm following now versus who I'm following now. At some point, it's just like, who are you following on Twitter? Because Twitter's a skill both as a tweeter and as a consumer. And so you need to learn how to follow the right people, and you only do that by being on Twitter a lot. So Twitter is extremely useful.
Oh, this is a question I get a lot from people, actually. Like, who are your best Twitter follows? Like, for somebody who wants to come into the space and not fall into like the BitBoy rabbit hole or something, surround themselves with actual good information.
Myself.
Of course. Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, no carbs.
Of course, it always depends on what you want. So like my answer is going to be if you're a person like me who wants the same things I want, which is like mostly Ethereum protocol and DeFi stuff and a few select NFT artists. Polenia is of course a good follow. And obviously there's stuff like Vitalik Buterin. Follow Anthony Sedano because again, like the target is to understand what the hell he's saying on the Daily Gwei. And then after that, let's see, the actual alpha of like, sometimes it's just appropriate to like listen to the hard mode people on crypto Twitter and just like kind of get a feel for it. But like, I also have like reservations about suggesting to go follow Degen Spartan.
I was just going to say, like, you cannot follow Degen Spartan on family members, significant others without seeing all the hentai on your feed.
I honestly didn't even know I was into that until it kind of
brought someone along. He's a true influencer.
Yeah, I mean, it's
interesting. Revelation.
David, in your
I think the better answer is I turn on tweet notifications from a variety of people, and I rotate who I'm listening to, and that like it's like you think of it like a extension of your attention. Like, all right, I don't really know. Like, people are saying that this person's really smart, so I'm going to turn on tweet notifications for this person for 2 weeks, and I'm going to get to know them and their tweets, and then I'm going to learn about them, learn what their deal is. Maybe follow them, maybe not, and then I'll pass the tweet notification baton on to the next person, and you get to like scour crypto Twitter a little bit faster that way.
That's really cool. Do you use lists, by the way, or just pure look at your feed?
Lists. Just look at the feed.
Do you got time in your busy day to have a non-account? Do you have a non-account that no one knows about?
Fuck no.
Oh, you wouldn't do it? All right, I'm just curious.
Okay, so you're not going to tell us your.
Why the thing on like the return on investment for building out an anon when you are a media person is like 0.
True.
Yeah. Stephen was convinced you were Mizzy for a while.
in our Discord, just ultra.
He's been banned from Anthony Sassano's Discord. From ours.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah.
Gotta respect the bullishness, though.
I love it.
Last couple things.
Well, I was gonna say last question. What are we gonna do for your birthday? It's coming up.
Ooh.
You know you're coming into town. We got to celebrate a big birthday, bud.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be there the actual day, but yeah, coming in Wednesday night, I think. Concert is, I can't remember, either Thursday night, sometime that week, and then I don't know. I don't fucking know. I'm there for
sheepdogs. Shill the sheepdogs a little bit.
Sheepdogs, yeah. I need to figure out how I get their attention on Twitter about how I'm going. Not that they give a fuck about who I am. There was one time that I said that I saw that the Sheepdogs was coming to the U.S. and I tweeted about them, and they were like, "Oh, hey, thanks for the shout out, appreciate it." I'm like, "Sweet." Like, how do I snowball this into like something?
Well, you invite them to the 8 bottles of sake that we're going to consume like the last night you were in town, and
we're doubling now. It's
we're doubling. Okay, we're going to invite them along for the party.
I have no clue if I actually want to hang out with the Sheep. Have you guys seen what they look like?
Yeah, they look very folksy.
Where they from?
Yeah, they're like the most Canadian Grateful Dead vibe that you can think of. Yeah.
Are they from Canada?
Yeah, they are
from Canada. Yeah.
Oh man,
it'll be a pleasant evening then.
Epic.
Yeah.
Well, we miss you in San Diego.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Literally not the same anymore.
Yeah, it sure isn't. Thank you, brother. I think that's a wrap. We're talking about politics if you want to go into capitalism, but we know you have a dinner. You probably have some hot takes for that. We'll get you back on soon. This was amazing.
All right. Cheers,
Peace.
guys.
Thanks for coming on, bro.
Thanks, brother.
Later, man.
All right.
Peace.